It's time now for perspective. Do you ever find yourself waking in the night, heart pounding as you contemplate the ravages of Brexit? Does just thinking about the amount of plastic in our oceans bring you out in hives? And are you even allowed to flirt with anyone anymore? If any of those sound familiar, you're most likely a worried liberal, and my guest today might just be able to help. Stuart Heritage is a columnist and writer for the Guardian newspaper. He's also author of Bedtime Stories for Worried Liberals. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on France 24 this morning. What, in your opinion, are the main things keeping worried liberals awake at night?
Oh, I mean, everything, just the entire state of the world. The big one for me is Brexit, which I've prepared for twice now, and it hasn't happened, and that's exhausting. And I guess also just like all the terrible things we're doing to the environment. Can you sleep at night? Are you good at that?
I think I'd say that Brexit's been keeping me awake at night too. You're not alone in that one, I can assure you.
Good. All right, that's nice.
So would you say it's fair to say that you're a worried liberal if neuroticism permeates your every waking thought? Is that the way you see it?
Is it neuroticism, or is it just like a basic sense of compassion for other people? I think it's the latter. I don't think it's neuroticism to just be aware of the state of things. Does that make sense?
It does. You don't think we've become slightly too obsessed with always doing, saying the right thing, behaving in a very prescribed way so as not to offend anyone? You don't think it's gone slightly too far?
Oh, well, yeah, all right, yeah, maybe it's gone a bit too far. And nobody's perfect. That's important to point out. I as much fuss as I make about the environment, I still eat meat. I just bought just the most nonsense plastic thing that I'm never going to use yesterday, so I feel terrible about that. Yeah, I think you can worry too much, but I think there is a healthy pocket where you can be concerned, just concerned about things.
So tell us a little bit about the book. What was the inspiration behind it? What's the need you're responding to with it?
I think that, well, I don't know. There is a chance that I live in a liberal metropolitan elite bubble, but all my friends are, whenever I meet them, they all talk about the same things. They're worried about Brexit. They're worried about the environment. They're worried about, the patriarchy, all sorts of stuff. And it's, I felt like there was a way of writing a sort of a soothing fantasy land where everything goes your way, in the form of sort of a bunch of short stories. So I've got a story where, for example, Jack climbs up the beanstalk, but the giant persuades him to become a vegan, for example. And it's just nice, happy endings.
There's no kind of cynicism there. It's all meant to be calming, reassuring stuff. Is that the way you intended it all?
Well, I mean, this has been. So I had a bit of a debate with my editor about this. She was really pushing the soothing line. I tend to want everything to end with sort of horrible, sweary violence. So there's a little
Not
bit of
particularly
that
calming
crept
for
through,
bed night stories.
No, well, not particularly, but it's fun for me, and I was the one who had to write it.
Now, one of the stories is called The Man Who Couldn't Even Hug Anyone Anymore. Do you think that we may have gone slightly too far down the liberal rabbit hole, that people can't instinctively tell what appropriate behaviour is?
Um, no, actually, no, I don't think that at all. I think that the biggest problem in the wake of Me Too, well, not the biggest problem, but one of the problems, is that there was a wave of kind of right-wing columnists saying exactly that I say in the story. You can't even flirt with someone at work anymore. And it turns out that it's a very one-sided relationship, and the person who is doing the flirting thinks it's okay, but the person who is being flirted at by kind of an overweight 50-year-old, their boss, that's if they feel uncomfortable, then of course you should stop. Of course you should.
Now, Barack Obama recently drew quite a bit of ire from some liberals for saying that woke culture has gone too far, a culture in which saying the wrong word, expressing the wrong idea can get you no platform. What was your response to those comments by Obama?
I just made me miss him even more. Do you know what I mean? He's just sensible. I think the point he was making wasn't that you can, if you're woke, then nothing will change. He was saying that if the way that your wokeness manifests itself is you just pointing out other people's flaws instead of making a change in your own behavior, then that isn't necessarily very constructive. And I agree with that. But yeah, 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 no, I agree with that completely.
And would you say your book has something to offer people who don't self-identify as liberals?
Yes. Yeah, I was careful to put that in because I want as many people to buy it as possible. So there's a story about parents whose like their kids won't move out of their house, and I've got a story where which is something I was genuinely was one of the first things I wrote. A story where it's the three little pigs, but the three little pigs can't agree on their own. They have the same basic ideology, but they can't line up specifically, and then they get sort of eaten by wolves at the end of it. And that's how I sort of feel about the left at the moment, especially with sort of the general election coming up in here.
Eaten by wolves rather than getting no platformed across various media, I presume.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing really. I've never been no platformed, but I'd imagine it's exactly the same as being eaten by a wolf.
Now, needless to say, Donald Trump, US president, is no fan of political correctness. I think the same can fairly be said of Boris Johnson. Should we understand these sorts of politicians, their popularity, or relative popularity, we should say, in the case of Boris Johnson right now, should we understand that as something of a backlash to this woke culture, do you think?
I think so, yeah. Everything tends to work on a pendulum, doesn't it? So we had a nice stretch where everyone was quite kind to each other, but then the people that alienated some people who just, I guess, like being horrible all the time. So now it's swung back that way, and I'm sure, maybe not in this general election, but in the very near future, it will swing back. I'm sure things will work out. Yeah, they have to work out, right?
Possibly, yeah. I'm a journalist too, so I'm not quite sure if I would share that same sunny optimism, but definitely food for thought. A nice bit of optimism to end that interview with. Stuart Heritage, author of Bedtime Stories for Worried Liberals. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
A reminder now of our top headlines here on France 24. The US House of Representatives approves rules for the next, more public phase of impeachment proceedings against US President Donald Trump. That vote very much divided along party lines, with no voting Republicans supporting it. And Iraq's president vows to hold early elections in a bid to quell weeks of deadly anti-government protests in the country. Demonstrators nonetheless taking to the streets to continue calling for systemic change.